Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Thanks for watching. If it looks like it's a little bit different setup, it's because this is going to be a really different episode of TBC. I've been talking about vinyl, obviously. That's the main focus of the show. I've also done a few episodes where I talk about cassettes, but this one is going to be different. This is one where I sort of really indulge a music collecting hobby of mine that is really wanting in logic, because I'm collecting a musical medium that is as obsolete as they get, and I have no way of playing these things, nor would I ever play them, because they were not built to last and they probably would wind up. And I'm talking about 8-track tapes. 8-track tapes, if you've never heard of them before, if you're of a certain age, they were at one point the preferred music medium for portable music, like for cars and trucks, because they were preferred. At one time they were manufactured in a better quality than cassette tapes were. And I think that I really became intrigued by the idea of collecting these things when I found out that 8-tracks were manufactured by record clubs all the way up until 1988. They stopped appearing in stores commercially around 1982. But Columbia House and RCA Music Service continue to manufacture them. And when I looked at some of the titles that had been released, I thought it'd be cool to get my hands on some of those. And I have quite a big collection, I think, and a lot of classic albums. So even if you're not into the format, hopefully you'll appreciate the albums. And you don't come across these that much anymore without resorting to eBay and gem.com and the like. This is what I've got from 8-tracks, very special edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. AC/DC, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. One of the biggest selling albums of all time, another AC/DC album, Back in Black. That's what it looks like on the spine, by the way. Some Canadian cartridges were this pretty red color, or orange. This is Aerosmith's first album. And this one is in really good shape, because a lot of times what the 8-track labels would do, they'd start to bubble. And also, hold this up to the light and you can kind of see exactly how much tape was inside one of these. And this isn't even that long an album. They'd stretch and stretch and stretch. And the thing about 8-tracks, they were broken up, if you don't know, and I'll just make this quick because I think a lot of people watching this would know, 8-tracks were broken up into 4 programs, not 2 sides. And each program had to be roughly the same length. So that's why you have cases like here. You've got a song, Write Me a Letter. Part 1 on program 1, Write Me a Letter. Conclusion, part 2. In some cases, and we'll get to one here in a second, where they actually do repeat a song, and they'll repeat the song that was split between 2 programs. So you'd literally have a song get halfway through, fade out, chunk. The program would change and then it would fade back in. Definitely not an ideal scenario. Toys in the Attic, one of Aerosmith's most classic albums. This is one of my favorite Aerosmith albums, An Overlooked One Night in the Ruts from 1979. This is another Canadian issue. This is what Canadian CBS cassette tapes looked like, with this yellowish printing. This one's pretty rough shape. There's Scotch tape over here, and it's hard to read the band and the title on there. This is a big selling album. Aerosmith's Greatest Hits came out in 1980, and this is an example of an album, or an 8-track, where you had a song that was split into 2 programs, but it actually repeats. And it says down below, due to tape cartridge programming requirements, one selection has been repeated. In this case, it's Walk This Way. It starts on program 1, concludes on program 2, and is played in its entirety on program 4. It's kind of crazy how they did that. No Canadian rock collection would be complete without some form of April Wine, and this is On Record, their second album from 1972. I've actually seen this one in several different forms. April Wine Stand Back, 1975. This is in pretty rough shape. Back cover, yeah, it's all, must have been tape on here. This one could probably stand to be replaced. The Whole World's Going Crazy, 1976. Yeah, this one has seen some better days. This one's in really rough shape. I don't even know if you'll be able to see it, but this is April Wine's Greatest Hits from 1979. This is what happens, depending on how it was exposed. This is what would happen to them. One of the most successful April Wine albums, Harder Faster. Here it is. This is a Canadian version. It's on Aquarius. In the US it would have been on Capitol. Next up, there are certain 8-tracks that you would come across in several copies, and this is one of them. The first Boston album, great album, all-time classic. This is a US one, which would usually have all the song titles on the back as opposed to having everything on the front. This would happen a lot. You'd have this bubbling thing go on down the middle. It's still not in bad shape. Second Boston album, Don't Look Back. This is a Canadian issue, obviously. Everything's on the front cover. You may have guessed I'm going through these in alphabetical order. Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight. Great album. This is a Canadian edition. Cover's not in bad shape, not a lot of bubbling going on. Cheap Trick at Budokan. What I like about this, Sony didn't buy out CBS Records until the late 80s, early 90s, yet this one, because it was recorded in Japan, it says Epic/Sony, so it's an 8-track on Sony. And if you're a geek like me, you notice things like that. All these Cheap Trick ones are Canadian. Dream Police, Canadian version. Probably my favorite Cheap Trick album, an overlooked one, All Shook Up, another Canadian edition. You could probably find the exact same one that was in red. I don't know where the decision was made to what color they would end up being. It's one of those many mysteries. And next we have an artist I have quite a few from. Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare. I don't know if you can tell this. Hold that up to the light. If you can see, it's imprinted in here. There is a Warner Communications company manufacturing thing. Like I said, I don't know if you can see that or not. A lot of these had that, whether it was Capitol or CBS. Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. I like this album a lot. This is a Canadian edition. Now this is interesting. Or no, it's not. This is an American edition. You can tell by looking at it. This is interesting. On the back, it actually says Division of Capitol Records. So they must have had different pressing plants that put these 8-track casings together. Another Alice Cooper album, Lace and Whiskey. This is a US edition. From 1978, From the Inside. Again, of course, it's Alice. And as we get into the 1980s, of course, 8-tracks became more and more scarce. I love this album to death. No pun intended. Flush the Fashion. This is Alice's sort of new wavy album, but sure is fun to listen to. This one's pretty old. This is from 1972. This is Deep Purple. Purple Passages. This is a Canadian edition. Kind of flips over to the back. This is a compilation of songs from the first 3 albums, so it's got Hush and Kentucky Woman on it. It's also got a song on it called Emeretta, which wasn't on any of the first 3 Deep Purple albums. Now, some people collect Purple Passages. Most people go to the doctor about them. My prize 8-track possession. I did have to eBay this one. This blows my mind, having Def Leppard Pyromania on 8-track. This is a US Columbia House issue. It only set me back about $25, which I don't think is bad. It's not in bad shape, but just the idea of seeing something that looks so relatively newer than a lot of the 70s albums on 8-track, it's kind of one of the reasons that sustains my interest in collecting these things. Next up, Heart, Little Queen, 1977. This album had Barracuda on it. This one, I don't know if this is the way I bought it. It came in this cardboard sleeve. I don't know if this is the one that came with it, but this is obviously a Canadian edition. One of my favorite bands, one of the many bands that's been featured on Tim's Vinyl Confessions in vinyl form, is Journey. This is their live album Captured, obviously a US edition. Escape, 1981. This is the big Journey album, Don't Stop Believin'. Who's Crying Now, Open Arms, all on this album. Kansas Left Overture. This album contained Carry On Wayward Son, 1976. This is a Canadian edition. Point of No Return, 1977. Of course, this one has Dust in the Wind on it. My favorite Kansas album, or one of them, Audio Visions. This is from 1980, and it's a Canadian edition. This is actually the first Kansas album I ever heard in its entirety. Next up, you might not be surprised to hear, I've got a certain amount of Kiss on 8-track, and I don't think this is an original cardboard sleeve. This is when I found it. This cardboard sleeve. It says Pickwick on it, but could have been. This, of course, is Kiss Alive, Canadian edition. This is when Casablanca was manufactured by Quality Records in Canada. So maybe this was the original sleeve that came with it. I don't know. There's some care tips on how to take care of your 8-tracks. It's my opinion that you could take the best care of them and it still wouldn't last. The other thing I like is sometimes you come across these things. You don't know where you're going to find them. I found this in a dingy pawn shop. Dingy. Cost me 50 cents, and it's in pretty rough shape. But of course, this is Destroyer, one of Kiss's all-time classic albums. Pretty rough shape, though. Another Quality Records. This one's made by Quality Records, so I tend to think that this was an original. This is Love Gun on 8-track, Canadian edition. I'm going to briefly mention Three Sides of the Coin when I can't remember which episode it was. I believe it was the vinyl episode when Mike was talking about getting Destroyer and thinking something was wrong with it because of the engine noises and the talking at the beginning of Detroit Rock City. Well, this Love Gun 8-track, I laughed because this Love Gun 8-track, actually, I listened back to it, it has a ball game taped over it, or part of it. So you can hear the music in the background and you can hear a ball game. This is Kiss Alive 2. I only have the first tape, so this is basically it would be sides 1 and 2. Goes as far as Tomorrow and Tonight. This is a US edition. Double Platinum, and again I only have the first. It came in a set of them that I got, and it was only the first cassette, so this one is only half of the songs that were on Double Platinum. This one's cool because it's the only one I have with a Casablanca 8-track sleeve. Marketed by Polydor. And of course the album is Dynasty. It's a Canadian edition. It's actually a Canadian Columbia House edition, so I don't think it's the original. This tape didn't come with a Casablanca sleeve, but that's the one I'm using for it. Led Zeppelin 4. Well, people call it different things. I call it Led Zeppelin 4, Zoso, Runes, or as Mike Myers from Wayne's World put it, the guy with the old man carrying a bundle of sticks on his back. My one and only autographed 8-track, Nazareth's Greatest Hits. This has the autographs of Dan McCaffrey and Pete Agnew. They played my hometown of Woodstock in 2010, and they were gracious enough to sign this for me. For the record, I didn't just get them to sign that. I had a copy of their then most recent album, The News. I had them sign that CD too, because I didn't want them to be insulted, not at all. But I've always wanted to get one of my 8-tracks signed. Queen 2, Canadian edition. Very good shape, no bubbling on this one. A Day at the Races, another Queen album. This is a Canadian edition. See, this is usually CBS cassettes would have this red casing, but of course this was on Elektra Records. This one's been around the block a few times. The Game from Queen. I actually think I remember listening to this very 8-track, or this album on 8-track, back when this came out in 1980. Some of my earliest memories were listening to Another One Bites the Dust. So this is actually one that I remember from way back. This is a Canadian edition of the game. This is one I just found not too long ago, actually. You just never know where these things are going to turn up. REO Speedwagon, High Infidelity, classic album. Keep On Loving You, Taking on the Run off this one. My largest collection by any one artist of 8 tracks is Rush. I've got a lot of them. I don't have the first one. Here's Fly By Night. This is interesting because it's the only evidence that I have that the first few Rush albums were released on Mercury Records in Canada, because this is actually pre-Anthem Records. So if you look there, there's a Mercury logo. This is a Canadian issue. It's got Polygram's address in Quebec, as does Caress of Steel. Looks roughly the same. So this is another Canadian issue of a Rush album on Mercury Records. Also this one, 2112, Canadian Mercury issue. So All the World's a Stage. Maybe I should move these down a little bit. I don't want to block my shot here. All the World's a Stage. This is in a Capitol casing. This is on Anthem Records, and Anthem was distributed in Canada at that time by Capitol Records. A Farewell to Kings, another Canadian Anthem edition. Very familiar Anthem logo. I need to move these a little bit more. It's still like a lot of the ones that this run of episodes I've been doing, it is storming really, really mightily out there. Very heavy wind. I don't know if there's so much snow as there's blowing around. Rush Archives. This one is simply the second part of it, which is the Caress of Steel album. So I don't have volume 1, which has the first album in Fly By Night, which technically would give me the first album if I had it. But it says volume 2, then down below Caress of Steel. Hemispheres from Rush. This one actually comes in the cardboard Mercury sleeve. So there's the 8-track itself, and the back cover, and the spine. Permanent Waves from 1980. Natural Science takes up the whole of Program 4. As you could imagine, it's a long song. One of the best all-time classic rock albums, Moving Pictures, of course, Rush again, US edition, when they started making this beige-colored Mercury cards. Exit Stage Left, second Rush live album, and one more. No, not good. This one's a little chewed up, but it's one of the more recent ones that I have, second only to Pyromania. Signals from 1982. A little chewed up on the side here, but otherwise, one of my dream 8 tracks to possess would have a very similar look to this. That would be Kiss, Creatures of the Night. Would love to find Creatures of the Night on 8-track. For the album. Okay, 2 more. Triumph. This is the first Triumph album. Canadian release only on Attic Records, self-titled. This album would be bundled with their second album, which is called Rock and Roll Machine, to create their US debut, which was also called Rock and Roll Machine. I go into that more in depth in my Triumph vinyl edition on TVC. Van Halen 2. This one, it comes in a Warner Brothers cardboard sleeve. This one's pretty beat up. It's still cool. And I got one more. ZZ Top Fandango. This is the one that Tush appeared on for the first time. It's half studio, half live, 1975. This is on London Records. And that is my 8-track collection. I hope you enjoyed watching this one. And, you know, you come across 8 tracks once in a while. A lot of times they're, you know, you see the same ones over and over again. Rarely do I come across Kiss or Rush or Aerosmith. And when I do, I get really, really excited even to this day. And this isn't to say that I'm done collecting these things either. Thank you for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Lots of other episodes if you want to check them out. Find me on YouTube, Facebook. And thanks to all you classic rockers out there for watching.